On sait aussi faire de la construction hors site en bois. Et on a Andrew, qui lui est architecte également, et qui pense que le bois est la solution pour la construction de demain. Andrew?
Merci bien, Pascal. So here we are, thank you, Pascal. Here we are, we're Waugh Thistleton Architects. Have I got a pointer? Or is it a TV? With Waugh Thistleton Architects, and you can see this is me in the red at the front. I'm the oldest. And we're a practice in East London, in Shoreditch, and we've been going for about 20 years. Closer to my mouth, like, oh wow, I'm really loud now. Okay, so this is, should I repeat that, or is that, anyway? So for the last 15 years or so, the practice has been focused on sustainability in construction. And the reason why we do that is because we take our position and the impact of construction and of architecture on the environment as a serious part of our architectural practice. So in the UK, about 50% of carbon emissions are down to the construction, the refurbishment, the rebuilding of buildings. So what we need to do as architects is to take that impact seriously and to realize that as the thought leaders, if you like, of construction, it is our duty, our job to really think about the impact of all of our actions on the environment. So in France and in the UK, we measure carbon over 50 years. So if we build a building now, in 50 years' time, more than half the carbon of that building will be the operations of that building. So the heating, the lighting, the air conditioning of that building will be the predominant carbon footprint. And the yellow line is the materials, the construction process and the materials that go into construction. Now, after 50 years, that's less than half. And in the UK and in France, we measure a building's carbon footprint entirely from its operations. But we don't have 50 years. In fact, to meet our targets for Paris, we have about 11 years. And now in 11 years, if you look at a building, more than 2/3, nearly 3/4 of a building's carbon footprint are down to the building materials and the construction process. And less than 1/3 are the operations in use. So 2/3, or nearly 3/4, terrible math, sorry, nearly 3/4 of our carbon footprint as architects are going completely unmeasured and unchecked by any regulation or guideline. And we have 11 years, probably the most important 11 years that humanity has ever faced. And this does not seem to be something that architects or contractors or developers or anybody in our industry is really considering seriously. Now, we know that concrete and steel are bad for our environment. In fact, embarrassingly for construction, actually it was the BBC, The Guardian, French News, etc., that began to tell us about this last year. So we know that actually just the production of cement is about 3 times greater emitter of carbon than airline travel. So when people are talking about airplanes all the time, actually we need to start thinking a lot more about cement and concrete, which are made, just the production of which are making between 15 and 20% of global carbon emissions and are going up all the time. So we have been doing a lot of work in terms of trying to influence our profession around this. And this is about Extinction Rebellion. So Extinction Rebellion is something that really started in the UK in force a couple of years ago. And now, as an architecture, and these are the parameters of Extinction Rebellion, the rules of Extinction Rebellion, which I think are really quite beautiful. I mean, just to pick out one, we openly challenge ourselves and this toxic system. It's about not blaming, not shaming, but aspiring to do better. So we march as an office regularly. We close the office and chain ourselves to buildings, and the younger ones stick themselves with glue to the Houses of Parliament and stuff like that. So we have a lot of fun doing that, especially when it's sunny. And we've grouped together with a number of other architects in the UK, and we've started a movement called Architects Declare. We now have over 700 practices in the UK who have joined this, and we have membership in 17 different countries of nearly 5,000 architects. So if you're an architect in the audience and you're not a member, then the good news as of last week is this. So, hey, Took a while. So everybody who doesn't know about this, you can sign up to this, go on the website, have a look, fr.architectsdeclare.com, and have a look and understand what it is that the architectural profession globally is beginning to do about this issue. But back to us. Back to me and my practice. So we started building in timber 15, 16 years ago, from cross-laminated timber, contre-laminé, oui, laminé, laminé croisé. Okay, they change the name all the time. So, so CLT, and we built this building, Murray Grove, which is a 9-story residential tower, and we built that in 2008. And the building is entirely timber from the first floor up. So all the internal walls, the external walls, the lift shaft, staircase, and we built the entire structure of that building in 27 days, 4 people. And it goes up very simply, very quickly, and very healthily. So all the benefits we're talking about modular construction, we recognize those in all types of prefabricated construction in terms of site conditions, in terms of the kind of homes that we're providing. So we finished that building in 2008, and it's still there. So it's nearly 11 years later. And I do a talk outside the building nearly every September. A couple of years ago, it was sunny. We had about 500 people there, which is very exciting, and people listening, people very engaged. And we have a guy who lives on the 3rd floor, and I feel bad for you people over there, sorry. We have a guy who lives on the 3rd floor over here with a parrot, and he leans out of the building, and as I'm talking, he says things like, it's all made of wood, and really helpful stuff like that. And I can't hear my neighbors, and I've never used my central heating, and other great comments. And so as a practice, when we finished that building, we thought very carefully about the implications of what it was that we had done. Not that we were doing, but we had done. That's how architects work. And so we started to think, we had all these phone calls and all this interest in the work we were doing, and we thought, well, we can either kind of keep this to ourselves and really try and kind of like, you know, be a market leader and kind of like say we're the only people that can do it. But we decided that actually we're so evangelical about what we do, we're so enthused and passionate and keen to spread this that we thought better just to write a book and give out all the details and all the plans and all the reasons as to why we'd done this building. So we wrote this book in 2009, and writing books and doing talks and giving lectures and papers and research has now become a core part of what our practice does. So we really have become a practice in research. And I'm going to talk to you about some of those projects now. So we finished this one a couple of years ago in Dalston in North London, and this is 17,000 square meters, and it is about 38 meters tall. And the reason why this project was so important to us is because of the scale. So if we are going to change things, if we are going to make a difference, if we are going to demonstrate that there is a viable alternative to concrete and steel using timber, then we need to demonstrate that that can be achieved at scale, and so that we can build big buildings in central London completely from timber. If we'd built this building in concrete, it would have been 10,000 tons of concrete. But building in timber is less than 2,000 tons of timber. So you can see immediately not just the carbon benefits, but also the benefits of building a material that weighs 20% of the structural weight of a concrete building. So much fewer foundations, much faster, much less road transport because you're prefabricating everything. So we reduced our site deliveries by about 80%. And also we're talking about a building that goes up with screwdrivers, no jackhammers, no grinders, no cement mixers. The whole thing goes up with cordless screwdrivers. So very fast, no waste, very light. So fast, in fact, that by the time the train has gone past, the building is finished. So there we are now, and that's a home and an office to over 800 people, which is equivalent to about 3 trees per person who live or work in the building. And we've written about that building too. And then we were commissioned by the American government a couple of years ago to, just before this American government, just at the very end of the last American government, we were commissioned to write a book about UK projects built from timber. So there are over 500 buildings in the UK made from cross-laminated timber. Not all of them by us, and in lots of different fields. So hospitals, schools, health centers, residential buildings, offices, gymnasiums, town halls, museums, etc., all built from timber. And so what we did was to interview 200 plus architects, about 300 clients at about 400 buildings, and to go through each one of those and then to present 100 buildings and all the facts behind them. And this book is free to download on thinkwood.com. So you can ask Pascal afterwards, he'll tell you. Now, we must be doing something right because we've got the concrete industry a little bit scared. So like the tobacco industry in the 1980s, when they started to tell you how healthy it was to smoke, the concrete industry are now trying to persuade us how healthy it is to build in concrete. So this is an advert in the New York Times on the left and a billboard on a road driving into Washington, D.C. on your right. So this is now what the concrete industry are doing. And one of the things they've done recently after the tragedy at Grenfell Tower was to write to every MP in the UK and to tell them how dangerous a timber building was, even though a concrete building burnt down. So we now face a number of issues in the UK in terms of our building regulations. So I would advise you all, government officials and architects alike, to keep your ears to the ground and your eyes open, because they're coming for you. And that was just in case you think I'm paranoid. This is our project in Paris at the moment, 60 units in the sunny suburbs of Aubervilliers, which we will finish in January this year. And if you check out our website, we'll be having an open day in Aubervilliers. So anybody who's never been to Aubervilliers before, it's fabulous. It's a beautiful place. And you're welcome to come and check out our new development in Aubervilliers. We have projects in the office now as a practice, growing from our initial base in East London to be working wide around the world. This is a project in Bergen in Norway. It's 1,700 homes made from timber, which float in the Lake of Bergen. And below the housing are oyster beds, which will help to clean the polluted lake above it. And all the buildings will be built from the trees from the surrounding forests. And that'll be it when it's finished. So I know that Mark Farmer was here this morning. I think this is actually Mark Farmer's graph that I stole from him. So, but did he show this graph? Did he show it? Damn. Okay, it's a great graph though. It's one of my favorite graphs. So we all know that, look, this is when England won the World Cup, right? This is like day zero. So England won the World Cup in 1966, in case anybody forgot, okay? In proper football. And 53 years later, we build buildings more expensively and more slowly than we did in 1966. This is a travesty. This is absolutely appalling. What are we doing? We're still kind of working this sort of like ridiculous craft-based industry running around in the mud. This is insane. This is how we built cars. This is how we build cars now. So we're working with a number of different factories producing cross-laminated timber modular housing. So one of the reasons why we really encourage the use of cross-laminated timber in modular housing is not just the sustainability and the health benefits of living in a wooden building, but also just the opportunity to be able to change that building, to be able to provide completely different modules very easily. Because if you imagine when a sheet of CLT goes through a cutting machine, that's a factory production line. So every time it goes through, it's exactly the same. But every time you feed the machine with a different computer file, the cutting of that panel can be completely different. So we can repeat the process, but each one of the products can be unique. So what we're looking at, if you have a light gauge steel frame building, a 2-bedroom apartment, is more than 700 components. But you do that in timber, and you have about 25 components tops. So the opportunity to change things, the opportunity to vary those modules around the building is much, much easier. So this is looking at a typical 2-bed apartment. Now we come from an industry looking at other industries to try and learn how to do things better. And I'm sure that everybody this afternoon has spoken to you about how fantastic the car industry is. And we really are fans of the car industry too. And this is our favorite chassis. This is a Mitsubishi GS platform chassis, and provides each one of these 14 models across 6 brands from that one chassis. Each one of these 14 models has more than 500,000 choice combinations. So from one chassis, you have over 7 million variations, over 7 million opportunities. When we spoke to somebody in the Nissan factory in the UK, they told us it had been 3 years since they produced 2 identical cars. Right, that's good, isn't it? I know it's my new fact. This is about supply chain. It's also, so what we're trying to begin to understand is that not every idea should just explode from the head of the architect, but that actually we should begin to talk to our supply chain, to begin to understand that you design through your supply chain in the same way that other manufacturers do. So to talk to the supply chain, see where the opportunities are for innovation within the supply chain. Now, I bought a new car, which is really exciting. When I bought that, I've never had a new car before because I'm an architect and I've always been too poor. But finally, I got a new car. I absolutely love it. I really recommend this car. But when I bought this new car, there were so many different things to choose from. I sat in front of my laptop for maybe, I don't know, 2 weeks, racking my head over, what kind of stereo system, what color seats, what color would the steering wheel be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we began to talk about this and to work with this and to work with our client base on this kind of idea. And what we've done with working with one of our clients in another architecture practice is to develop within the Revit model, so within the BIM model for the architecture, is to work out a client-based choice system. You haven't spoken about this today, have you? Okay. Work about a client-based choice system where once the client has identified which apartment or which house they wish to purchase or to rent, that they can come in and then they can make choices with the developer for that flat or for that house. So when they move into that house, they have the kitchen they want, they have the bathroom they want, they have the bedroom color, the carpet, the one that they actually want. So the level of actual ownership that the person who is buying the house, buying the home, feels over that home is completely different. So talking to our clients, we realize that actually typically in a residential building, in a for sale building, they will rip out the bathroom and rip out the kitchen within months of buying that. Now that's obviously insane. So to provide people with houses that they actually want rather than the houses which they're just told they're lucky to get. So this is our actual first completed CLT module, which arrived on site about 6 weeks ago, which is very exciting. So this is half of a 2-bedroom socially rented apartment in East London. And that same unit being craned into position on site. And again, by February this year, it will look like that. So that's 68 apartments, 7 stories in East London. Built and completed in about 10 months. And so we thought we'd write a book about that. And this book is also available online. Talking to our client about modular housing, and they have a vast amount of projects, and talking to them about working with other architects and how that's working for them, they say the problem is they speak to the architects about building in modular, and the architects then come back to them and say, well, I've designed the building, unfortunately it doesn't really work for modular. And so the client then said, well, I asked you to design me something I could build in my factory. And the architect responds, yeah, that wasn't really working for me. You know, I had a different idea about what I might do, et cetera, et cetera. So what we were asked to do by our client is to write a book not really about how to design in modular, but why to design in modular, to try and enthuse and excite architects about the opportunities and the benefits for working in modular, and to try and get people passionate about it. That's available free online in English only at the moment. But actually, if there's much demand, we'll write it in French. So what we started as a practice looking at in 2003, our first timber building, and what we started looking at then was about building buildings that were built from a low carbon, replenishable source, thinking that we wanted to actually begin to be part of a solution rather than part of a problem. And that when we started to do that, we realized the buildings that we could build were strong buildings, they were firm buildings, they were healthy buildings to live in. We worked out that we could build buildings that were variable, buildings that could be made in a factory where people could choose what kind of apartments they could have. So as a practice, we don't see building in mass timber as one of the choices for an architect. We don't see building in modular as one of the choices for a developer. We see this as the opportunity for a complete revolution in construction, a completely different way of building whose time has come. And this is the amount of tree seeds that it took to grow the trees that built our first 9-story building. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Again, amazing.